Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Jeff Gerstmann Hall of Fame. My name is Jeff Gerstmann. This time out, I've got a batch of games that are weirdly connected, I guess, in a few different ways. They all kind of do their own thing and are great for different reasons, I guess I would say. But then these concepts intermingle in weird ways, thanks to European game development. You know, some of the games I want to talk about today are from that era when the bedroom programmer was out there kind of cloning arcade games and putting them out on home computers. And, it's sort of the Jeff Minter, obviously Jeff Minter did plenty of his own stuff. But there's, you see little bits and pieces of like, oh, okay, this is a more updated take on Centipede. And back in the day, he made things that were more direct clones of other games and such. And, he was not the only person that was out there kind of doing that sort of thing. And at a time when some arcade games didn't receive official ports at all, some of these clone games were really the only thing you could get at home. And that ends up being kind of a fascinating thing, because you have this backwards way, whether it's because arcades were just not prevalent where you were from, or, you just sometimes arcades didn't have the game you were looking for or whatever. But sometimes you stumble into these games backwards. The Gianna Sisters problem of you played Gianna Sisters before you knew there was a Mario, that sort of thing. So naturally, if we're going to be having this sort of discussion, we are, of course, going to turn to the Commodore 64. And first up is a game that came out a couple of years after the game it cloned, the arcade game it cloned. I'm going to make sure that this is in fast loading mode here, because I'm loading it off an accurate version of the tape, because that was the first version I could find that booted up properly. This is a game called Space Pilot. 1984, though there are some versions that have a 1983 copyright. Now, this is a version of Konami's 1982 arcade classic, Time Pilot. And despite being named Space Pilot, it still deals in time. Here's a look. Here we are, 1919. That beep means that there's a squadron coming in. If you defeat every plane in the squadron, you get those bonus points. You also see these guys parachuting that need to be rescued. The story in Time Pilot, I never really, you're traveling through time, you're rescuing people, you're really tearing up a lot of era appropriate planes and helicopters and stuff like that. And basically the goal here is to run out the time. And when time expires, a boss ship will appear. And then you kill that to move on to the next level. And there's the blimp that signifies our time to get the heck out of here. We've done it. Now, on to 1940. The planes sound a little different. But, between 1919 and 1940, what else really changed other than the buzz that the planes made? Other than that, totally identical. Everyone knows it. Every history book says it. Oh, I got I got hit. I didn't... Now, a thing that this game does that, that regular Time Pilot does as well, so, I want to make sure to credit that game. You'll notice that the movement of my ship... It's very fluid. Now, look at the number of angles I am able to shoot in. Now, I'm on a regular old 8-way, 4-way, a regular old joystick. Or in this case, a PlayStation 5 controller, but you know what I mean. You're using the Commodore 64 controls. There's nothing analog about it, but you do get this kind of analog-like turning radius out of this game that lets you shoot in a lot of directions. And I think there would be a lot of ways to... So how this works is when I push left, it slowly starts to rotate until I'm facing left. And so there's sort of a rotational aspect to it, but the rotation is like smooth, and surprisingly so, I would say. And so you end up feeling like you have this level of control over your ship that a lot of other games didn't have then. Here we go, 1970. Helicopters with homing missiles now that are going to try to, spin around and get us. Heat seekers. But this turning, the way this game handles these turns is what makes this game so cool. Because at the time you just didn't, you would point in the 8 directions and but it didn't always feel like you were able to shoot in those directions. You had, like, before that, games like Asteroids were doing something pretty similar, but there's a fluidity in this movement that you just, I feel connected to this ship in a way that you don't get out of a lot of other games of the era. Oh. And I think that's the thing that really sets it apart. Of course, like I said, regular Time Pilot does this as well. And so I have to say, the amazing job by I think a German guy did the work on this version of the game. It's just, this is an amazing port of a game, and completely unofficial, obviously. And at a time when, there were not a ton of ports of Time Pilot to American home computers, or, I know it came out on Xbox Live Arcade on the Xbox 360. But before that, there had to have been some. I want to say maybe there was like maybe they did do a 2600 version or something like that. But there were a bunch of like janky. There were some janky versions of this game, and I want to say some of them maybe only came out on Japanese computers or something. So maybe that's why, I've played some more recently, but of course in the era, I don't think I saw a single port of Time Pilot. Period. This was it. And I saw it years later, but it's easy to recognize as like, oh, dog, they're making Time Pilot. Yeah, this is just a good feeling game. Okay, on that note, I'm going to show you Time Pilot now, so you can get a sense of just how, I guess, direct this really is. Let's see. Let's change this over from this to this. Please deposit coin and try this game. Obviously a faster and smoother game than its Commodore 64 clone. Oh man, going from one to the other is crazy too. This game feels like it's running at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Oh my god, this is the smoothest video game I've ever played. Look at this! This is the power of the PlayStation 5 Pro. No more compromises. Visual fidelity and performance. All in one package. Oh. $19.40. So you see, pretty direct over there on Space Pilot. Despite being called Space Pilot, it still is a game about time and time travel. Oh, I love this game. It's just, it's so, again, it's so smooth. And it's just, you just feel like you're weaving between the bullets. Like it's just a real, again, connection to your ship. That you don't get out of a lot of games of the early to mid 80s. All right, helicopters. I remember I got all the achievements in this on the Xbox 360 and felt pretty proud of myself. Okay, we got it. Got to get around on these missiles before they get around on you. Okay, timer's expired, so we should be seeing... Ah, whoa! Something. There we go. $1982. That's the year the game was made. Modern technology. Ugh. I find on some of these later levels here in... Oh, man. On some of these later levels in Time Pilot, I feel like it's easier to just kind of always travel up or down. Like you just kind of don't... There's less, like, kind of screen surface area at the top and bottom, being a vertical game. And so you sort of get a little less heat by kind of constantly heading in a direction. Oh, man. Oh. Big jet, get it. Okay. $2001. Everyone remembers 2001. This is, well, this is what happened. You wondered what the truth really was about the things that happened in 2001. Time Pilot was trying to tell you all along, if only you would listen. Oh! Ooh! Oh! Another nice thing the game does is it lets you feather the fire button. I'm not mashing the button. I'm not holding it down. Basically, every press of the button gives you about 3 shots. So you don't have to, like, you don't have to mash it super fast. You can just kind of feather it relatively repeatedly and get a good steady stream of fire. Which again, you feel like you're just dumping. Look at the number of shots I'm getting out there. Okay, we gotta be careful here. I'm almost at the end. Ooh, my thumb is starting to hurt. There we go. Whew. And we've looped back around to 1910. They're shooting way more missiles on the second loop here, but... Oh, got me with one. Okay. Anyway, that's Time Pilot. It's a great feeling game. I don't know why this is still... Oh, God, you know what? Sorry, I had Space Pilot running in the background this whole time, and it was taking joystick input. And so it was starting games of Space Pilot on the Commodore emulator here. So let me just reset that. I was like, why is the audio a little weird? That's why. There you go. Now you know. Whoa. All hell's breaking loose. Time Pilot is badass. And Space Pilot is a great home version of it, even if it is unofficial. Just a game that I played the heck out of on the Commodore 64. You know, it's like one of those things you just as we've talked about before here, sometimes you just get some discs, man. You end up with some floppies. And they got like 12 games on them. And you're like, what's even on here? There's like 6 on this side, 6 on the other. Who knows who put them there? Who collected this particular batch of games together? Hot, cracked games for you. And so, without that, I never would have even known that Space Pilot existed. But it was great to be able to play Time Pilot at home. I hadn't really seen much of the arcade version of Time Pilot because none of my local arcades really had it. So it's probably something you see on an episode of Starcade and then maybe encounter, when you're not at your home arcade, when you're out and about, maybe you see it here and there. But I don't remember any of my normal arcades ever having a Time Pilot machine. And so I've probably played way more Space Pilot than Time Pilot at this point, if I had to guess. Next up, and it's perhaps a strange connection that will make sense later, but Moon Patrol. From your friends at IREM, but mostly known as a Williams release here in the US. They licensed it for US release, so I always think of it as a game from Williams, but it is not. Now, this game I think I like for an entirely different reason. It's the music. It's just a great little, like, what? Like, is it... I was gonna say, does this qualify as like a 12-bar blue? No, I guess not. Yeah. It's just a sick little doom 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 doom. It's just a sick little bass line. Iconic in its era. Let me turn it up. This is a cool game. I don't want to say, hey, it's a bad game with great music or anything like that. It's really good at the kind of like rub your belly, scratch your head kind of thing. Of you've got to manage the road in front of you and the sky above you. And you have one fire button that fires in front of you and above you. But like if you see here, the front shot is on a much different cadence than the upward cannon. And so if you're here dumping into the sky and then suddenly rocks come your way, you need to be sure that you have a shot ready. Oh, tiny rocks. Tiny rocks. The bane of any moon rover's existence. Double rocks, too. So double rocks become kind of tricky to shoot in a world where the fire rate of your front cannon is, let's say, not great. And so you end up in these situations here where, you know, you're being attacked from above. These guys, these little three-way guys, drop bombs that create new craters that you have to jump over. And so it's kind of a little bit to deal with all at the same time. Oh! Oh. Okay. Time to reach point J. So these records are kind of kept, I don't think they're stored in, you know, any kind of NVRAM or anything like that by default, but, you know, as long as the machine is turned on. Oh, mines. So if this is a situation where, like, if you look at the way my shot shoots, it explodes into a bigger kind of, and I'm pretty sure, oh my God. I missed it every time. I think if you time, no, maybe not. With those tiny rocks, you can do that. If you time the explosion just right, the explosion will take out the tiny little rocks. But I guess the mines you probably just have to jump over. Moon Patrol is a neat game, but it's the music that makes it a standout. You know, the music I would put in the Hall of Fame. The game itself is really good, but it maybe misses it by just a hair here. Now, the reason Moon Patrol is relevant at all to this conversation brings us back to the old Commodore 64. Right here. With another little game published by the same publisher as Space Pilot. Weirdly enough. More games should have loading. I mean, you know, there are probably a lot of good health reasons why a lot of games don't have loads like this. We're going to engage warp mode on this emulator to get this game loaded up faster. Now here we have Battle Through Time. A game that dares to ask the question, what if we made a new Moon Patrol game, but gave it all of the trappings of Time Pilot? And so here we are in World War I. This being a one-button controller, you have to push up to jump. and you have, I'd say, much more direct control over the speed of your vehicle than you do in Moon Patrol. Oh! I think I could have just run that guy over. You also gain momentum when you jump. Like here, watch when I push up, you kind of it's more of a forward motion. Like you start kind of picking up speed a little bit. You know, music not necessarily as original. I was gonna say as iconic as the Moon Patrol theme, but I suppose maybe disqualified. That's some of the music in the later levels here, which will rocks. Okay, we're 6 miles. I think you have to get 10 miles to reach the end of the level. And I think it'll let you continue, so we should just be able to cruise through some of the different times here. We did it. Your molecules are now being transported into another time zone. You're entering World War II. You know, different graphic for the bombs, different looking planes. Different music, but the same basic idea. I think in some ways, you know, especially, okay, when we think about home ports of Moon Patrol, there were more of those, I think, than Time Pilot ports. But, you know, because I think Atari got the rights to it, and so Moon Patrol kind of came everywhere. All over, and got to jump over those. Missed it. This I think is a faster and more fluid feeling game than most of the versions of Moon Patrol that I have played at home. You know, the arcade version of Moon Patrol I think is still rad and holds up in a lot of ways, but some of those other ports are janky, let's say. The addition of the having to like shoot all these planes twice to really destroy them is an interesting twist as well. Our molecules. Korea. You think they chose Korea? I mean, this will make more sense in a second here. You think they just chose Korea because they knew that they would have good, like, that they had good music to use for it? Oh. Just straight up the MASH theme. You know, that TV show about the Korean War. I forgot that you start getting planes from the other direction and this kind of like bombing run sort of situation. in this level. That's kind of cool. Also a lot harder to deal with. Oh, man, I didn't even... I was so focused on when's the next plane coming that I never even saw that crater coming. Oh, man, okay. But same basic, you know, like your fire rate on your forward-facing gun is not great here. Oh, man. Like, I think yeah. I'm gonna make this window bigger, which shouldn't make a difference for y'all. Continue previous game. There we go. Okay. But this kind of goes in the same direction as Time Pilot does, where eventually, you know, they reach what they consider present day. You know, that kind of early, I guess more closer to mid 80s. This was also 84. And then, you know, take things into the future with UFOs and such. And I love that. I love that, like, the concept, like, none of the gameplay of Time Pilot is really present here. But the entire premise and like progression and all of that stuff is fully on display here. Like, recognizable as, like, this dude played Time Pilot, but also played Moon Patrol and said, what if? And then he did it. And I think that's so cool. Of this era, you know, like the ability to kind of take these things and mash them up is really rad. And something that I think, you know, was only really possible in this era because you did have that kind of, like, again, that single developer mindset. You had that, I swear I pushed up. I swear I pushed up that time. But also that mindset of, you know, hey, these developers in Europe and the United Kingdom and so on didn't really have arcades the same way that we did here. And so as a result, you know, they took matters into their own hands. And so it was less of like a, hey, I'm stealing this, and more of like, I don't really have a way to play this. I want to play it, so I'm going to make it myself. And then they end up selling it. This is maybe a little weird, but hey. Vietnam. Helicopters and jets way too volatile to fall to the ground. They blow up in the frickin' air. Pretty sure these guys will hover over you and drop bombs if you let them. But why let them? Oh. Jumped a little too late. All right, we're over halfway through this one. I don't think I noticed until, you know, playing the two games back to back that there, you know, there are way fewer craters in this game than there are in Moon Patrol as well. As I say that, one shows up. I don't know what they... World War III. Uh-oh. (2024 AD). Sure. And so now... the audacity of this developer. Ken, what have you done? Like, no, it's going to take some Star Wars music. We're not going to have TIE fighters coming at you or anything. Well, we are going to have a spooky cloud that shoots lightning and also some weird satellites, some weird flying things with satellite dishes on top of them. I like that here in World War III, against the almighty cloud and these things, that there are still dudes on the ground with rifles that you're running over in your freaking time Jeep. It's so good. Oh, I forgot all about I knew, you know, obviously the game's going to have some kind of UFO type thing, but I forgot this music played over this level. Whoa. That cloud's in a real bad range for me. At full speed. We're almost there. Oh! See what I mean? Is that... Did his head come off separately? As a kid, I was like, oh, I don't know, his helmet came off, or almost looks like a soccer ball. What the heck is happening here? Like when you get hit and come flying out. Oh, God. It's the end of the world. I mean, it's a good thing we got out of there, I guess. Wait a minute. You got me there. War mutations. After World War III comes whatever this is. Ah! Weird mutant hand coming out of the friggin' ground. Oh, geez. I mean, the answer is to probably go kind of slow. So you can see if the weird, creepy hand thing is going to launch out of the spooky black rectangle on the ground. Yeah, that's what I get. That's what I get. Pretty sure that's the last level and it loops around after that. Just rad, man. This game... with all of its stolen music and concepts and everything, Battle Through Time is a real pastiche of gaming. And I super love it. I love it. Is it like one of the greatest games ever made? Look, that's a tall order. Is it in the Jeff Gerstmann Hall of Fame? Absolutely. The way it brings so much of these, again, the music and all of that, is funny and cool, but the way that it so directly applies everything Time Pilot to Moon Patrol, it works super well. Like, for the same reasons, the Time Pilot is like fun. You're like, oh, it's helicopters because it's the 70s, and it pulls off that same stunt, but applies it to a totally different arcade game. And it works really well. Like, I almost want, it would be fun, you'd have to do a lot of work, but it would be fun to see someone go ROM hack the arcade version of Moon Patrol to turn it into a Time Pilot, to add that same style of as you move through the levels, you take on different eras of attackers, a different aircraft. That would be like a fun, weird thing to come out of all that. But that progression of Time Pilot, and then you got Space Pilot, and then out of Moon Patrol, you get Battle Through Time. Like, the Commodore 64 was a truly lawless platform, not just from all the games that people were stealing by downloading them or copying them from their friends or whatever, but the developers themselves, very little respect for intellectual property, and as a result, we got some really amazing and really like fascinating artifacts to look back on and go like, look at this thing. Look at this thing. Look at this straight up clone of Time Pilot where they have replaced the word time with space. And then also look at this game that is straight up Moon Patrol with Time Pilot painted all around it. A couple of fascinating games that I played the heck out of back when I got my hands on a Commodore 64, which was a few years after these games were current. I'm not even sure that these games saw domestic releases. I know that, one of them, I believe, I did confirm there was a US version of it. But at the end of the day, like, these were games that like Analog was publishing in Europe and wherever else, and different publishers would take it on in different territories and different cassette tapes and different. It's fascinating sometimes to go look at like box art for Commodore 64 games, especially these ones, the kind of, below the radar sort of weirdness. Because you'll just find like 9 different versions of the box art because 9 different companies published it over the years. And, it got published here by this company in Germany, and then this company did it in the United Kingdom. And then it ended up on a cover tape for a magazine 5 years after it's released. And then at some point, Mastertronic picked it up and put it out on some tape that was 99 pence or something, and so these games had these weird long cycle of re-releases in some cases, whether it was territorial or just like a battle through time from one release to the next. It's sometimes fun to go see all the different box art and look at it and go like, oh, it took 2 years for it to come out in this other territory. That's weird. Or, hey, this was a weird budget release that came way later. And, there's just the lifespan of some of these Commodore 64 games is strange. It's not something we really see much of anymore. And I think that's always fun to go back and look at as well. And so that does it for this installment of the Jeff Gerstmann Hall of Fame. Space Pilot and Battle Through Time are the primary entrants here. They were when I woke up this morning ready to record. It was like, okay, we're going to talk about these games. I was like, you know what? I can't really talk about these games without really talking about Time Pilot and Moon Patrol, so I might as well play both of those. Time Pilot is a full-fledged entrant into the Jeff Gerstmann Hall of Fame because Time Pilot is sick. Don't be fooled. They made Time Pilot 84. They made a sequel to Time Pilot. And they also made a sequel to Space Pilot on the Commodore 64, which is funny, but it's a different situation. Time Pilot 84 is not a good game. or rather, it's an extremely different game in ways that are just not nearly as interesting as that first game was. And so it's a step backwards in some ways. But I think, when we think about the arcade industry heading into 84, 85, 86, and, those weird years that we kind of hit that moment of diminishing returns on some of this stuff as the era of arcade game changed into something a little bit more complicated. When we got to like Gauntlet, or let's say, Gradius a few years later, as some of these arcade games started becoming more and more complicated, the kind of single screen shooters of the world kind of hit this weird identity crisis at a certain point. Well, maybe that's a bit of a strong terminology to put on it, but I will say that Time Pilot 84 supports that hypothesis, where you just look at it and go like, man, they were out of ideas for games like this by 1984, or 85, or whenever that thing came out. But Time Pilot, the original game, fantabulous. Moon Patrol is in kind of our categorical offshoot, the check out this cool shit wing, along with G.I. Joe, and K-Ray-Z Shootout, because the music in Moon Patrol is so fantastic. I had to sample it at one point for a remix. It was too good. I had to rap over the Moon Patrol theme. I'm sorry. I apologize. I shouldn't have done it. It's in some ways ruined the Moon Patrol music for me, because now I go like, oh well. But Moon Patrol is a cool game. I'm like, I don't mean to only induct the music as a way of saying Moon Patrol is a bad game. It's fantastic. It's just maybe not quite to the level of some of the other stuff that's in there. And yet Battle Through Time is, because I'm a sucker for that specific time travel. Look at these helicopters, look at these jets, like the thing that Time Pilot does, it does so well. And seeing it replicated, always loved it. I always loved Battle Through Time. It's probably, those two games are probably in my top 10 for the Commodore 64, really. Which is, I think, always going to be skewed for a lot of people, simply because, no one played all of those games. And so everyone has weird personal attachments to different batches of games, depending on what discs they had. And I'm sure it was different if you were in the UK at the right time and the games were being sold. But like, by the time I got a Commodore, you didn't really see a lot of C64 games in stores. I bought a handful of games. They were always on disc, and it was like Batman and Paperboy and LA Crackdown, which was a terrible game. But I was like, yeah, man, the cops shooting up drug busts and killing drug dealers. We got to get that. And then LA Crackdown is a miserable video game. But yeah, that's maybe those are stories for a different time. So I want to thank you for watching. Thank you for your underwriting of the Jeff Gerstmann Hall of Fame. And we'll catch you next time. Until then, I'll see you.